Welcome to another episode of the in.sync podcast, the podcast connecting business and spirituality. Today we will be talking about success is never a straight line and overcoming failure. Well, I guess we have a lot to talk about on that topic since we've both had a few successes, but also a few bumps in the road. Correct?
Bumps. Yeah, it's like huge holes rather, but yeah, let's call it bumps, sure.
So first of all, about the word failure, I personally like to use the word failure, but not because I associate anything negative with it. As in, I don't give it a meaning. I just see it for what it is. But I don't think failure is something, oh my God, like you should never experience it. In fact, I do think you should experience it. But I do know that a few people have kind of reservations for using the word, correct?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there are like the fuck up nights that are like only going about the topic of failure to actually make it more common and to make it socially okay to fail. I personally also don't have a problem, but for me it starts even earlier. That what is the definition of failure even? When is something or someone or whatever a failure, right? And if you think it's so negative, then obviously you will have a problem like labeling things like that. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's like, I mean, even I had some really huge failures in a sense. So when I'm seeing like one of the ventures I built did not work out, and we gave up after 1.5 years of working on it. Is it a failure? By classical definition, I would say yes. For me, definitely not. I learned so much along the way. So for me, it was never like, oh my God, I can't talk about this. It's such a huge thing that I did and was wrong. It was like, yeah, well, it didn't work out. Fine, let's move on. This is what I learned. So that's why I'm thinking, I don't know, it's hard to label things as failure.
Yeah, I guess that's a good definition, and I share that as well. And I think this is good to set the scene with before we dive into the topic. So yes, we talk about failure, and yes, it is definitely an event and situation where things didn't work out as planned. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's nothing to be scared of. It's something to deal with, and that brings you a lot of learning and growth opportunity. So I think we can agree on that definition.
Definitely, 100%.
Okay, so how do we want to start on this? Do you want to maybe share like what your first situation was that you perceived as a failure, or do you want me to start? Because I think there's big ones, there's small ones, right? At the end of the day.
I don't know, like if it's even like if you get me started on the things that didn't work out in my career plan, so to say, over the last 10 years. I think this podcast will be long. I don't know. This episode is about 5 hours, and I think for me the major learnings or the biggest failures for me in a sense was trying to have a corporate career. I ended all my corporate engagements between 3 and 6 months because I just learned, oh my God, I'm not made for 9 to 5. I'm not made for this, structure. So that could be a big huge fuck up in a sense.
So interesting. Sorry that I just jump in there, sure. Because I do remember you being in that environment for a bit, which wasn't even that corporate. It was always like still, young companies, cool companies. I never heard you talking about it as failure. And that is one of the examples where you just realize that's not for me, where other people say that's so bad, blah, blah, blah. And you just, that's not for me, I move on.
Exactly. But like as external things, okay, I quit my job after starting one of the, I think 4 months. So that's a huge failure. Also, my definition of failure in the sense that the other company I worked for, I did never accomplish anything in this like period where I worked there because it was just not for me, and the structures they had in place, I wasn't meant to accomplish things there because there were so many hierarchies I needed to jump to actually get any proof for anything that I wanted to do. So for me, not delivering any of the milestones I set for myself within this period I was working for there, that's failure. But for me, obviously it was great because I learned, oh my God, corporate world is definitely nothing for me. And I really want to have hands-on experience and, work for myself in a sense.
Nice. And that's exactly why we are talking about this episode in this episode about failure and overcoming it, is because what you're describing is you had this situation and it showed you so much. So overcoming that moment has then led you to where you are. And as such. I mean, I've had that as well multiple times. I think I've actually pivoted my career probably heavier than you did yours. And where a lot of people said, oh, that's, that can be, or they didn't say it, but that can be perceived as failure. I always thought it just brings me to
closer.
where I am. So therefore, I think failure is an amazing thing, actually.
I think so too. I mean, especially if you learn something out of it, right? For me, the actual failure in a sense would be to be stuck in that job and just do it for the sake of it, for reputational purposes, for money or whatsoever, and not taking charge of it myself. So that's why I'm fine with the outcome. But that was the sweet little starting points of the failures in my career, so to say. But obviously after that, there were huge obstacles, let's put it that way. But they are all like in an entrepreneurial sense, and I think they're even bigger. So I guess, I mean, this episode will be more about them, because it is about overcoming. And I think overcoming in a corporate way, like the way I saw it, and it was just a learning curve in my career, what I like and what was meant for me and what not. But actually building a venture and then failing with it, or having problems like, getting to break even or getting customers, team, whatever. That's something that's actually, for me at least, was very hard to overcome, in a sense. What made it, what emotional impact it had on me.
It does have an a very high emotional impact. That I agree. That's so makes me think.
Yeah. So I mean, I had the first startup I started to build with my two co-founders that failed completely, in a sense. We didn't really have the go-to-market in place and stuff like that. And I think the biggest thing there was to overcome the problems between my best friend back then, who was my co-founder, and me, because we both really worked hard for 1.5 years on this venture. And then I kind of felt disappointed that she gave up, which was legitimate. I swear, we were so far from what we actually wanted to build. So I do get it. So that was like something I think I needed back then 3 months before I could start talking to her again. We are still like in a great place now. We're great friends. But back then it was like, yeah, that's hard, because you believe in something, and then what it does to you emotionally if you fail, in a sense that you believed in something so hard for years and worked your butt off to get there, and then not achieving it, that was hard. So that was definitely one of the first things what I learned, like in entrepreneurship, that's okay, how to overcome and how to get back on track once you realize that it doesn't work out. And I think it's more or less the sentimental value, because you put so much heart and soul and effort in this venture, and then you realize it doesn't work. So obviously it also does a lot of things to your ego, because am I good enough? Maybe I'm not the right person to do that, because maybe it's me, because maybe it's this venture failed because of my decisions, because of what I put in there, because I wasn't doing the right things at the right time and things like that. So it makes you question yourself a lot, in my opinion.
There's quite a big emotional attachment, especially in an entrepreneurial environment, I find, because it's a small environment. You usually start something from scratch. You work very closely with other people, with your co-founders, and I feel like it's a huge emotional component that you have to manage, that you might not have in a, well, actually that you don't have in I know the comparison in like in a corporate context, for example, where you just realize, okay, this is not for me, and then you move on, but there is no consequences to that decision. When you fail in a startup environment, there is a lot of consequences that you need to manage, that emotional part.
I mean, I guess you are more that person because you were into this environment, but I guess also if you lead a project in a corporate and this fails, and this like was a 100,000 euro project or multiple 100,000, what are you doing then? And it's also, it maybe also was not your final decision to agree in yet, but at least you gave the recommendation to do so, right? So I guess that's also not good for your ego.
Yeah, that's true. No, you're right. But I feel like in a corporate setting, there's always, there's such a big machine behind you. It's not immediately visible what is your action that caused the entire thing. In a startup, when somebody backs out or something goes wrong, like you immediately see the effects.
Yeah, that's true.
And everyone else around you sees it as well. So that's something where that I personally found harder to manage.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concept back of extreme ownership, which you rather have as a startup founder, obviously, or business founder than in a corporate context. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what was your biggest obstacle?
I mean, my biggest obstacles. So as many of you probably know, I by now, because we spoke about it, when I used to be in consulting first, and then I got out of that to start my own venture. And then in consulting, in that 5-year period, there was multiple situations where, you know, I didn't get on a project that I wanted to, or like I didn't deliver the results, or didn't get the promotion, all of that. So you can probably classify that as mini failure as well. But that always just gave me an opportunity to think, okay, what do I actually need to do to get on that project, or to get the promotion. So I found that overcoming failure in that environment was kind of very supportive, because they were giving you a lot of guidance as to what you can improve. And also because it's a straight line, like the career ladder is a straight line, like it's everyone goes on the same. So you can just talk to the one that is above you and figure it out how you actually get to the next level. So I thought that was more like, of course, you know, I felt my ego was hurt, and I felt bad about myself for not making it, and I didn't perceive it as like the biggest failure that isn't manageable. When I founded a new business, however, there was this was a huge blowback for me, and I don't even know where to start, where I started making mistakes, because there were so many red flags, so many situations where I didn't listen to my intuition, to what my soul knew was right for me, and instead I let myself drive by, okay, this is cool and this is hip, and you know, you should be that sort of entrepreneur, blah blah blah. And at the end of the day, if I would have listened to what I already knew when I knew it, I would have prevented a lot of bad feelings at the end, because there was quite there were loads of frictions with my business partners at that time. And so that was definitely a failure that has taught me so much. I think this is probably one of the most transformative experiences that I had. So, but because it is so transformative in terms of, you know, aligning, like really listening to what's already in me, and knowing that, and walking with that, and being clearer on the type of venture that I'm good at and that I want to build, and all of that. So I learned all of that then. But because this was such a transformative experience, I feel like there's such a huge emotional part, which I would say at this point, it's a few months back, I have managed 90%. There's still 10% that I'm still not over it. So that's crazy.
I think it's also part of the identity you have there, because you failed with something, and there were so many things that you thought you could do. So it takes, just like, you know, and there were other people involved also. So it's also the connecting part that somehow, like for the both of us, because I know our stories, got a bit disappointed in the people we trusted most, or at least trusted a lot. And I think that's why it just takes longer. And it's also very challenging in the future endeavors that you take on, right? Because you have this, like, you are scared that this happens again. I mean, I can talk for me. And whenever like a similar thing comes up now, I'm like, okay, how do I react in the situation? Is it maybe the same thing that I had before? So I'm very cautious in a sense. And that's why I think it is an ongoing process, actually. I do not identify with me as this, I'm a failure just because I failed. It's not that. It's just I'm very cautious about the same things or similar things happening again, in a sense of a pattern that I want to be aware of to avoid the mistakes I made.
Yeah. But I think it's good to have that level of awareness and knowing, you know, what went wrong, and then not doing it again, because that if you do it again, then I actually think that's real failure. Like going through that experience is necessary to get you to that point. Doing this exact same thing again, what you know is not for you, that's a failure.
Yes, but but I feel the same, obviously, but it's never exactly the same thing. So you will really need to understand what is the underlying
Yeah.
cause. And for me, for example, speaking of that, I'm not sure if I'm 100% there, that I understood what really went wrong. I mean, there were so many components. Obviously, there were other people involved, so it's always harder because there are different emotions and feelings and interests and needs. But it's hard for me even now after a year or so from the last obstacle I encountered to really pin down what was it exactly, or what should I've done differently besides listening to my intuition and starting to change things earlier. But I think it's hard to understand what really caused it and then not repeat that part. Because again, in entrepreneurship, it's not a straight line. You have thousands of influences around you and factors that can change literally everything in a second. So that's why I'm like, I don't know yet.
Okay, interesting. Because I feel like, I mean, humans tend to generally overthink and overanalyze. And I think you especially as well, because you're a very self-aware person. So you always try to dig like one level deeper, like what is it really? Um, for me personally, I think, I was also like thinking long and hard, like what is it exactly, and like coming up with all of these fancy reasons in my head. But really it came down to me, and it does still come down to me. I was not aligned with my purpose. What I actually wanted to what I want to do in this world was not aligned with what I was building. And that I knew. And of course, then I asked myself, but if that and that and that. No, it was just as simple as that. My purpose was not aligned with that. And my intuition told me this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
Now,
Yeah.
the next question is, of course, what is your purpose? So if you don't know that, that's a bit of that can be challenging then. So and we had an episode on this, even like that it's really difficult for like, or that purpose is like a buzzword, and that it's quite a high level concept for most people, and it's not always super easy to point out. But my lesson learned from that experience was, for example, okay, I know my purpose wasn't aligned. I know my inner world wasn't, my intuition told me my values weren't aligned. I could tell all of these things, but I went out of it and I couldn't quite tell, like, what do I do better the next time? And so this is what I then spent, oh my God, so many weeks on.
Yeah, that's true.
And to really, yeah,
Of
right?
course.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when we talked first, and then like I still didn't find my purpose. I mean, it was like last year already or before even, but I think you worked like very hard in the last year to get that. Once
Yes.
you see that there is something lacking, and then you feel that this is the part, the puzzle part you needed, you knew where you put your energy in. And I love
Yes.
what you're building now and the clarity you got out of it. So for you, definitely this year, and I always said that even when you agreed to the job in the first place, I said it's necessary for you to get out of the place where you are now and to
Yeah.
grow as a person. And I think that's why I would never say it was a failure for you, because it was so necessary and it transformed you like big time. And I'm not sure if you would be there now if this wouldn't happen. I mean, 100% not.
I'm 100% sure. Yeah. I
But
feel like when I look back like a year and a half ago or so, like I almost don't recognize myself anymore,
yeah,
because there's so much that happened. But and like for the good, right? So it really shaped me. But yeah, like how just to talk about, like I want to share a bit about how I'm overcoming this, because as I said,
yeah,
like I still have these 10% that are not 100% where I'm still emotionally attached. But I think the 90% of, okay, I need to overcome this positive failure, if you will, was by finding, okay, I know now what the cause is, but then what is my actual purpose? And I spent so much time on this, especially in the last couple of weeks, because I wanted to make sure that whatever I'm building now is 100% me. And of course, there's always variations here, and like whatever gets, I have an end goal, whatever way gets me there, I don't mind. Like I'm completely open to that. I'm not focused on one or the other thing, which is why what I also learned. But for me, the game changer was, okay, what can I learn from this is finding my purpose. And knowing what I want to build next. So that helped me overcome that bad situation.
I get that. I mean, I can tell you, because maybe it's a bit different for, it's not only purpose, but what I agree on is it's intuition that tells you. Because I feel, you know me, I always did everything with purpose, with impact. Also with the last ventures, I never had the feeling this is misaligned. Like really not. It was really something I wanted to build, but my intuition nevertheless told me it's not right for me, right?
Mm.
So there were some little things and hunches all the way along, and I didn't notice, or I just like was like waving them away and saying, okay, it will go back, it will get better, we'll get there in the end. And that wasn't true. And I think purpose, yes, that's for me anyways, forever I want to do. I want to go build things with purpose and do things with purpose. But it's even more important to still listen, because just because the venture is built upon your purpose, it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right people around you, it's the right cause, it's the right thing, that the way you build it. And I think what is most important, what I learned out of it is, just because you're aligned with it doesn't mean it's meant for you. So I like that you said, doesn't matter how you get there. That's exactly what I learned as well. Okay, I also know what I want to build, but it could be that things are not the way that I thought they are, right? And for me, important is to realize, okay, if life's giving you this like little hunches that you shouldn't go in that direction, then you should listen, even if you're
Yes.
aligned with your purpose and everything, especially if it's recurring.
Yeah, I've actually also learned that through various spiritual practices, that it's such a misconception of us humans, that we think we have to have this one goal that we work towards, and then we put all our energy towards it. And for example, could be I'm building an e-commerce store, and then it's like, that's where your energy goes. Whereas if you're, and then it might fail, because that's actually not what you were supposed to do. So if you define your end goal and like your overarching impact that you want to have on this planet, in your life, like for example, you building a community, for me it's really being like a driving force in the creation of like a spiritually aligned world. Whatever road gets me there is fine. Of course, I have a business right now which I'm building, which is aligned with that purpose. But if that business turns out to not work at one point, then I'm okay to pivot the business, because I'm not focused on it needs to be this service business. It can also be a different one if it is within that overarching goal that I'm trying to achieve.
100%. I mean, I'm not saying you need to have a goal, because we know already I'm not this goal setting person. But
you have end goals. You have end goals, which is the broad, like I want to build a community, I want to have an impact. That is your goal.
Yeah, I want to have an impact, and I want our world to be a better place, for sure.
That is an end goal. And that's actually what I learned in my spiritual practices as well. Like that is an end goal. So you have a goal, but you're completely open to what gets you there. And I'm the same, like I have an end goal. Whatever way gets me there is okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what was the major things now, how to overcome it? Like being embedded in a purpose-driven impact-ish, whatever vision you have, and then like seeing it more like as a learning curve, and that life shows you where you should go, right? But
yes.
I mean, we didn't really touch it, but I really, one thing, it's still hard obviously for me to talk about that, was like last year I really had a hard time. And I think this experience, if you really fail, especially as an entrepreneur, for whatever reason, it was for me literally liberating to see that yes, even I can have like a more or less depression phase. So that was the first time for me. And you know me, I'm like sunshine person. I'm actually usually in a good mood. I always see the positive things in life. I'm really aligned with what I want to do. And, I'm generally like a happy person. And whenever someone told me they're not like, happy, they want to change things, I was just like, just get over yourself. It's like really that easy. Just change your thoughts. And then when this last year, when this happens, and I had my co-founder split, I literally had like for 2 months such a dark period, and it was worse than people dying in my, like, how I deal with death is completely different. For example, it was worse than any breakup. It just stripped me off the feeling of me like accomplishing things, of me being a generally good person. So this whole breakup process, in a sense, with my co-founders back then, really transformed the way that I was as well. And it really, yeah, made me go through a very, very hard and dark period in my life where I literally couldn't get out of bed. That was for me very, very hard. And I think I never expected that from me. I was like, I can do, like, I'm such a strong woman. I can do whatever I want. And like, just because like some things are not working out, it would be fine. Yes, in the end, it was fine. That's also my learning, obviously. But during this period where, yeah, it was just like my ego was obviously hurt, but also I really struggled to believe in myself. I have like high self-esteem. I never had problem with my own confidence, but this was a period was really reflecting a lot of that, and it took me a while to get back my strength and my belief in myself. Even though a lot of people always, including you, told me, no, you're great, you're a good person. It's not you, you will get over it. All good, everything will align itself. Yes, it did in the end, but that overcoming and that actually getting there to a better place really took me some time. And I just wanted to share in case someone is going through this process. For me, what helped most was really just taking the time off. I literally just was in bed and I wasn't engaging with anyone. I wasn't responding, and I really needed to take the time to suffer and to just feel the failure, feeling bad to a certain extent. And then just like, okay, well, I definitely fucked that up a bit, and then slowly but surely rebuilding things. And what helped me then to overcome it, obviously because I'm a workaholic, was really starting the next venture.
Yeah.
which is also nothing what I would recommend. I think it would actually been better if I would just have taken some month off and travel and really get my mind off of these things, reflect a lot, maybe having like I don't know, like really just a silent treatment somewhere. That would have been better in a sense. And luckily, a couple of months before like all this clash happens, I was 2 months in Bali, which really like strengthened me in a sense that I found balance faster. But yeah, I wanted to share the message that it's totally okay to feel bad in a sense if something like that happens. If you feel like a failure and if you're like really need to withdraw and work on yourself and work on your rebuilding your self-esteem. But in the end, it will get better. You'll get out of there.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think this is a very, very important lesson that you and I learned, because I went shortly after that through exactly the same period. Yeah. And especially with someone like you and I, we are generally, we have our lives together, and we are also perceived as that by other people, of course. And when people, like when we go through these things, it's difficult for people to understand that actually happens. So for example, you went through it first. I didn't understand. Like, I just simply did not understand how you could feel like that, because I never saw you like that. Only when I went through that myself, I realized, holy shit, this is an actual thing.
Without all the bad words here.
Yeah. But only then I realized this is an actual thing. And it was so difficult for me to relate to you when you went through it, because I hadn't felt it myself. So I imagined that everyone else around could also not relate to it. And that's also what I realized when I went through it. I just I realized no one can relate to it. And what I did, I think you and everyone has their own ways of dealing with it. You just withdrew and took your own space, as you just described, which is perfectly fine. I told people about it. I told people that I feel like, really mentally not good. I need some support and stuff. So I was asking people for support, because I knew from the experience with you that people will not be able to relate to it. But at the same time, I also, actually now reflecting about it, yes, I did ask for support, but I also did withdraw quite heavily. And I remember
from like, especially in your case, from contexts that couldn't relate to it.
That couldn't relate. Yes, that's right. For example, I spoke with you like all the time, because you, and I'm honestly, I was so grateful for you being able to relate to me, because I just thought, I mean, if I wouldn't have you to talk these things out, then I would not know where which place I would be. And then it made me think like I felt so bad because I couldn't be there for you when you went through it, because I couldn't relate. So massive learning for me there too. And I remember when I arrived in Germany a couple of months ago, this is so crazy because I had it all together. Like, you know, I was withdrawing, and I was just taking time for myself, recovering, all of that. But I kind of had it all together, and then I still, you know, on the outside. And I remember I was. I arrived at the airport, and my mom picked me up from the airport. And I'm usually not a person who easily cries or so, you know. But I saw her, and I couldn't even say hello. I was just crying for probably half an hour or so. I was just like, oh my God. And my mom, she completely confused about this because
this is my daughter.
Yes, because she also, like, I was not telling her about what I was going through because she is so protective, and like she would just not have been helpful in the situation, you know. She would have been she would just be worried. She would haven't been worried, so helpful. So I didn't tell her about it. But when I saw her and I just saw my safe haven, I was just like crying. So that's just why I'm sharing this, similar like you, is like, even if you're like the strongest, most put together person in the world, like it can happen to you, and it's fine. You need to let it out. Like you said, you just lying bad, and you were just allowing the pain. I just needed to get all of these tears out, and I felt so much better after that.
Yeah, of course. But you never told me that you cried with your mom.
I didn't?
Here now.
Oh, yeah, I cried
also,
like baby.
You crying, it's like me crying. I mean,
yes, exactly.
I do cry, but it's still from the outer perspective, like, where's
yes,
cry.
And can you imagine, like, when you come out of the gate, and the people stand outside to wave at you when you come out with your luggage and stuff.
Smile, and you're like,
and I was like, at the luggage at the baggage thingy, you know, I was still very fine. But then I walked out, and I saw my mom, and I was just like, oh my God, that's it. That's it.
There you see what we are always like, especially us, like talking really about us as people, and what we are putting ourselves up with, and showing the strength, and also believing that we are strong and we don't need anyone, and then at some point it just breaks.
Which I think is the most important part of all of this, if people can take that away, is yes, you know, be strong and be independent and have your life together, but also allow yourself to feel the pain and be sad about when things go wrong. It's okay to cry. It's okay to lie in bed and feel the pain. I think it's actually, it's just part of it. It's really fine.
Fine. It's like totally fine. It's really totally fine. It's just, for me, I think it was more surprise that I can experience that as well.
Yes.
So it's fine if it happens, obviously, but like me being a strong person, I need that. Like, I need to cry, really. And I think one other beautiful thing was, most of the people that I shared that with, not all of them, but they had an understanding for it and was okay, because I'm like, usually I'm a helping person, right? I always try to make everyone around me like comfortable, helping them, supporting them in everything what they need. So during this time, I just hadn't had the strength. Mostly I didn't even check in with my friends. And in the first place, because I didn't share, because I just needed time for myself. It was hard also for them, because obviously the real friends, they want to help you, but I didn't really let them. And then once I was ready and overcome the first part, I actually shared that I'm not up to it. I can't really give what I usually would give. And actually most of my friends were like super understanding. However, there's always this layer that they don't fully understand. And I think it was the same also for you, because you also did not know or like really understood back then what I went through. And it was really hard for me also to not be this helping person anymore. And then if people are asking you to support, because that's what you always did, and then you just can't. So that added an extra layer. And actually some of the friendships broke during that period, because I wasn't the person they were usually hanging out with, so to say. And even ours was on very thin ice back then, and we didn't talk for a couple of months. And this was part of it, because I needed to some time to find my strength again. And
so I think Actually, on that note, yes, our relationship was a bit of on pause because you were going through stuff and I was going through stuff, and we couldn't connect at that level because we didn't fully, we just couldn't relate to each other at that point.
Yeah.
But I think you said some relationships broke, and I saw the same in my life. I found that the key is, even though, you know, you want to withdraw and you don't want to speak about it, you at one point you're going to get out of this phase again, right? So make sure that you do at least be open with the other person and tell them what's going on, and that you will be withdrawing for XYZ reasons, which is what you did. And then you can work out how your relationship can go from there, because it's also not fair to withdraw and let other people just, you know, wonder what's going on. So have that courage to say, like, listen, I'm just not good, I'm going to withdraw. I'm sorry that I can't be here for you, but that is what it is right now. That's what you did, for example. And I shared my feelings about that. And then we're like, okay, we can't relate to each other right now, but we are still friends always, right? So, but I think if we wouldn't have done that, then who knows where we would be. So I think it's very important lesson as well to be open about this with people.
Yeah, but also if you don't, I think I saw that with other friends. I mean, the way I am designed is, even if my friends are not reaching out for a certain extent, and then they say at some point, listen, I really didn't feel well, because I went through that phase myself, and I just know how it feels if you don't have the strength to be there for others, and you don't even have the strength to check in with them. So that's why I'm totally, hey, that's fine. If this is what you do you, like, it's fine. I'll always be there, because I know, and this is like targeting my friends that are really friends with, like, true friends for years. We are friends, so it's fine. I'll understand, and I'll always be there for you. But it's just important, to share.
I think it's just easier for you have gone through it, so you kind of can relate to it, but there might be other people who have not gone through it. They cannot relate to it. So I think it's easier for people to just know what you're going through, and they don't necessarily have to help. But I mean, I think just to conclude on that, because we are nearing the end, I think we can conclude that, first of all, successes, yes, they are really never a straight line. You just have to be aware that in order to be successful, there are these situations where things go really sideways, and they are kind of a redirection onto your actual path where you're meant to be and what you're meant to do. So overcoming failure is just part of life. It happens in different degrees. When it happens, like where things go really wrong, then take the time to reflect on what is it that went wrong, and what is the lesson that I learned from that? What can I do better next time? What is my inner state telling me? And lastly, allow yourself to be sad and withdraw if you want to, but make sure that you get out of that phase again as well. So see it as a temporary.
Yeah, it's not you, it's not who defines you.
Yes.
And for sure you'll get out of it.
That's right. Beautiful. Well, beautiful sharing, interesting experience that we've had over the years. I'm sure there will be many, many more, but I'm kind of excited for them as well, because I feel like they've presented such huge growth opportunities.
Yeah.
And without those, we would not be here today. We would totally not be here. We would totally not be on this podcast anywhere.
Totally. And it's I also want to say, it's very humbling to go through the experience like that. And it also, I think, makes you a better person, because you really feel yourself in different circumstances. I think both of us, we wouldn't get home crying with your mom and stuff, you know. So it brings you also closer together with people that are involved during this time. So
totally
appreciate it.
Sweet.
Okay.
Tune in next time, and we'll be short next week. We'll be back next week. We'll be short next week. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.